الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد أشرف المرسلين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. Jazakallah khairan everyone for being here. I know it's towards the end of the semester, towards the end of the year, and it's typically the time when MSA activity tends to get a bit more quiet and people tend to go about doing their own things with the exams. So mashallah, the fact that there's such a great turnout here is a testament for all of you, inshallah, and the testament on your account of the Day of Judgment. Inshallah, the brothers have asked me to speak today about, I guess, wrapping up the year for the MSA. And from what I've heard, it sounds like Macquarie has had an amazing year, a very impressive year, mashallah, in terms of the MSA. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala increase the barakah and increase the rewards and increase the effects that all of your actions and all of your da'wah have, not just in the Muslims here, but in the rest of our ummah, inshallah, and may it be an inspiration for all of the future years. I asked the brother sort of title of the talk, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose you, because I think it's a fitting title to describe the sort of activities that are and the sort of involvement that we typically have in our MSAs. And it's a tough role to have, working in the MSA in universities, because we get such a mixed bag of individuals in universities. We get such a mixed bag of individuals in universities. So putting aside all of the non-Muslims that we come across, the range of Muslims, the different backgrounds, international students, local students, those who have been to Islamic schools, those who went to public schools, those who went to possibly Catholic schools, the range or the spectrum of how practicing somebody is, where you'll find among uni students those who are learned to the point of almost being mashayikh, you might even say, or have the knowledge to teach various areas of the deen, to those who might be struggling in their path towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So there's such a range, and it's where the role of the MSA becomes very difficult, because identifying who we're catering to and how to cater to them, and who am I to sort of be giving da'wah to other people, and how do I send across a message without coming across as if my head is so big and I see myself as better than you. And that's part of the issues that I'm sure that you've all noticed that you try to navigate through in terms of your da'wah with the MSA. And I guess to sort of backtrack from all of that a little bit, the question becomes, first of all, is, who do you need to be involved in the MSA? And who do you need to be involved in da'wah in general? Or who do you need to be to call people towards Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And I think our definitions of certain words are very much affected by the society that we live in. And I think one word that we throw around very often is being religious, right? A religious Muslim, or whatever religion, but typically, obviously, within our circles, a religious Muslim. What does that mean? When we think of the most religious person you can picture, and what they wear, and the way that they speak, the way that they carry themselves, the actions that they do. When we think of the most loved people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when we think of the most loved actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the images that come to our mind. And I want to try to get a bit of conversation. If you guys will save me from asking questions and then just having a bunch of empty faces staring back at me. But when we think of like a religious Muslim, right? Like, what comes into our minds? What are the first images that pop into your mind? Shout them out.
Like, he's very aqil, very kind. And
good, very kind, good character. Possibly very quiet as well in their manners. What else?
A clean white abaya.
Clean white abaya, beautiful, yes. What else? Sisters as well, feel free to mention anything that comes to mind.
A white t-shirt and grey pants.
White t-shirt and grey pants. Or a pink shirt as well. What else comes to mind? A religious Muslim. That big, like this big, beautiful, yeah?
What?
Sorry?
No, I'm calling the what?
What?
Sorry, I didn't catch that. Oh, Fuad, you're calling Fuad, that's my bad.
That
Yeah, what else? Fuad is a perfect example of mashallah, religious Muslim. Anything else? What comes to mind? I'm sure there's other things. What sort of actions? What are the most loved actions that we can think of? The most loved actions. If you picture, there's a hadith that the Prophet ﷺ mentions the loved action, the most loved action of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If any of you know the hadith, that mentions the answer. But if you had to guess, what do we think is the most beloved action to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Salah. What else? Someone who calls towards Allah. What do we think might be the most loved actions?
The one who teaches the Quran.
The one who teaches the Quran. The one who remembers Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Okay. What are some categories? The Prophet ﷺ mentions in the same hadith, the most beloved person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Who do we think is the most beloved person to Allah? Not by name, not a specific person, but a type of person. A hafiz of the Quran, sister, a muttaqi, someone with a lot of taqwa. Sisters, any ideas who might be the most beloved person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Brothers?
The Mujahid.
The Mujahid maybe? And all of these are beautiful, amazing characteristics, right? None of them are the correct answer. Prophet ﷺ said, أَحَبُّ النَّاسُ لِلَّهِ أَنْفَعُهُمْ لِلنَّاسِ. The most beloved of people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that brings the most benefit to other people. The most beloved actions to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is a jihad, is it memory of the Quran, is it salah. He said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, it's to cause happiness to reach a Muslim. That's it. The most beloved person to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that gives the most benefit to other people. The most beloved action to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you think of all the things that we're trying to picture, it's the one who causes happiness to reach another Muslim. It's to relieve your fellow Muslim from hardship, to settle a debt for a Muslim, or to repel hunger from them, to give them food, or to give them money, or to support them. The Prophet ﷺ says, and when we think of khuruj, or when we think of i'tikaf in the masjid, and the brothers who do that, mashallah, especially in Ramadan, the Prophet ﷺ said, it is more beloved for me to walk with a brother in order to assist him than it is to spend a month in i'tikaf in Masjid al-Nabawi. That's huge, right? Imagine somebody that spends a month in i'tikaf in the Masjid of the Prophet ﷺ in Medina, right? Where hasanat are already multiplied 1,000 times for your prayers. Let alone i'tikaf there for a month. That's our definition of religious person, right? You're going to look at this guy and think he's religious. To walk alongside my brother to relieve him in his time of need is more beloved to me than to spend a month in i'tikaf in this masjid of mine, he said, sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So when we picture this religious person, and it happens to all of us, it's natural, the image that we get. It's the sister that's wearing the niqab, the brother with the abaya and the long bead, the one who spends all night praying, the one who's memorized the entire Quran, the one who's so humble in the way that they speak, and they're always walking with their head down, and all of these are beautiful characteristics. I'm not putting down any of them. But this is a very almost secular mindset towards what being religious is. The fact that we've taken on our society's definition of religious and narrowed down this entire deen to just our individual acts. It's how long can you grow your beard? How long do you spend that night praying? How much time do you spend reciting the Quran? And we've neglected this entire deen, the rest of our deen, because the word deen doesn't just mean religion in the way that the English language says religion. Deen is much more. Deen encompasses everything. We always say Islam is a complete way of life. What does that mean? It means every single thing. From the moment I wake up until I sleep, and even during my sleep, every single thing that I do is an opportunity for ibadah to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The religious person doesn't have to be the one that's wearing the clean white thobe and the long beard. The religious person could be the one who simply smiles to everybody that walks around them and has a nice personality. They're nice to talk to. When you see them, you feel like you've just had a weight lifted off your shoulders, right? It could be the person that spends their time cleaning the streets, the person that picks up rubbish when they see it, or they make sure they don't litter, that separates their recyclables and their rubbish because they want to save the environment, because we have an amana towards this earth. It could be the person that takes care of their animals. It could be the person that calls up their friends and checks up on them. It could be the person that dedicates their time and money, the person who spends their time at home helping their parents or helping their children or helping their spouse, in whatever it is. All of these are opportunities for rewards in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala hasn't separated this deen into these are your religious actions and these are your dunya actions. This whole deen versus dunya, that's not what Islam divided. Islam told us this entire dunya is an opportunity to earn rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And there's so many hadith on this, right? But without going into all of them in the detail, I'm sure we all understand this concept. That every single thing that we do is an opportunity in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, His rahmah encompasses all of us. His mercy encompasses all of us. And sometimes, because it's who we are naturally as humans, that we make this caricature, this stereotype of what a religious Muslim is, And we all know, like, I'm not a hafiz, I don't get up to pray every night, I don't fast Mondays and Thursdays, I have my own sins, I have my shortcomings, I'm not the one at the forefront of every single da'wah, I don't give public talks and lectures, and I don't have the most beautiful voice in tajweed and so on. And then because we reflect on all of these negative things, we end up becoming like, I'm not the religious one. It's naturally who we are as humans, psychologically, right? We focus on our negatives, we ignore our strengths, and we tend to put ourselves down, right? Religious actions are anything that we do with the intention to please Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, of course assuming that that thing is halal and it's beneficial, either to us, or to those around us, or to the environment, or to animals, or anything that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given value. That's the definition, right? Setting the right intention is one of the most important things. When you sleep at night, if I sleep with the intention that I'm doing this so that I can wake up for Fajr tomorrow, every moment in sleep is reward from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, inshaAllah. If I sleep with the intention that I need energy so that tomorrow morning I'm able to take care of my kids, right? Or so that tomorrow morning I'm able to go to work so that I can make halal money to support my family. Or so that I'm able to have energy to carry the da'wah, right? Your sleep is ibadah. When you eat, and I consciously make an effort to eat halal and not to eat haram, your food is ibadah. When you eat with the intention of, again, replenishing my energy and having calories in my body so that I'm able to survive and function and then able to carry out all of these things that I do that are beneficial, which is my study and my work and my time with my family, with my parents, with my friends, my time in da'wah so that I'm able to not feel the pangs of hunger as I'm praying or as I'm reciting Quran, your food becomes ibadah, right? And my point here is that we tend to spend too much time focusing on our negatives. We tend to spend too much time putting ourselves down that, who am I to carry this thing? Who am I to be part of da'wah? Who am I to see myself as religious? Who am I to give myself value? We don't need to give ourselves value. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us that value. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen us to be Muslims. He's chosen us to be part of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And so it's time that we move on from this sort of mindset and start to think, what can I contribute to this deen? What are the things that I can do to earn rewards from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he said, مثل المؤمنين في توادهم وتراحمهم وتعاظمهم. My page closed. The example of the believers in the mutual affection and their mercy and their compassion, مثل الجسد. It is like one body, right? And this is a hadith that we've all heard of, where when one part of the body feels pain, the rest of the body is in fever and is sleepless and feels pain. And I'm sure we've all heard this hadith in the context of caring for your ummah. When we see Muslims around the world who are struggling, who are in pain, who are oppressed, we feel their pain. But the wording of the Prophet ﷺ has so much depth and meaning in it. مثل المؤمنين مثل الجسد. It is the example of a human body. Now think of your human body, right? We have 2 eyes, we've got a nose, we've got a mouth, we've got 2 lungs, you've got a heart, 2 kidneys, a liver, a stomach, and so on. What would happen if I replaced your heart with another lung? What would happen?
You did.
You did, right? If I replace your brain with another foot, what would happen? You need your feet, they're really important, but what happens if I replace your brain with a foot? You're dead. What would you say? You can't, right? Your body needs all of these different organs, different parts of your body in order to function. What does this ummah need? Does it need 1 million brains and no hearts? Does it need 1,000 hearts and no lungs and no limbs? Our body is made up of all of these different organs that work in conjunction to achieve, whatever functions that our body goes about to keep us alive, to keep us thriving. When one part of the body struggles, we struggle to an extent as an entire body, but the rest of your body makes up for it. When your foot is injured, you limp on the other foot. Or when somebody suffers an amputation, or you see the people that, subhanAllah, they have no legs, and they manage their lives walking or mobilizing on their arms. When your brain is weak, or when you're blind, for example, you see, subhanAllah, blind people that their other senses are so stimulated that they're able to detect people coming through hearing and vibrations and whatnot. They're able to lip read if they're deaf, which the rest of us don't really do because, alhamdulillah, we don't need that, but also because we're not accustomed to that, right? My point is that we need all of these organs. And this ummah needs different people in different areas with different skills and different strengths. If every single one of us was a hafiz who just stood up at night and prayed and did nothing else, this ummah would be nowhere. We need people in every single field with the right intentions and the right mentality who can carry this deen to the rest of the world. And we see this in an example of the Sahaba radiallahu ta'ala anhum. Our Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam would never have achieved anything on his own, of course with the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but he surrounded him with the right people. And we know of Abu Bakr and Umar and Uthman and Ali, these are the Sahaba that come to mind when we say Sahaba, right? And they were the peak of the peak. How many Sahaba were there? The scholars say over 100,000 who attended the final Hajj of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, who, according to the majority of the scholars, all get the title of Sahabi. But even if we just look at the close Sahaba who lived in Medina, there were 2,000-3,000, and that's of the men, of course, of the women and the children, 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 in Medina. Those 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 were not Abu Bakr and Umar. They were human beings, right? And when, subhanAllah, when you study the seerah of the Prophet, when you study the lives of the Sahaba, one of the biggest things that you can appreciate is the humanity of all of them. The examples of Hassan ibn Thabit, for example. Anyone know who Hassan ibn Thabit is? Radiallahu anhu.
شاعر الرسول صلى الله عليه وسلم.
Sha'ar Rasulullah, he was the poet of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam would appoint him. He was from Medina, he was one of the Ansar, and we know that poetry was the media of their time, right? These days we put out Facebook statuses or YouTube videos refuting each other, okay? Back then it was poetry. And that's what people used to do. And so when the Prophet ﷺ had migrated to Medina, the Quraysh in Mecca would recite poetry attacking the Prophet ﷺ and attacking the Muslims. And so the Prophet ﷺ needed somebody to respond. He himself was not a poet, and Nabi al-Ummi, he had never recited poetry in his life. So he stood up in the mosque and he said, who's going to recite poetry to defend my honor? One Sahabi stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, I will do it. The Prophet ﷺ repeated again, who will defend my honor and recite poetry to defend me? Another Sahabi stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, I will do it. He repeated a third time until Hassan ibn Thabit stood up and said, Ya Rasulullah, I will do it. And that's when he accepted. He was waiting for that response. He wanted Hassan ibn Thabit. Now Hassan ibn Thabit radiallahu anhu was from Medina. He didn't know the people of Mecca, he didn't know the tribes of Quraysh, he didn't know what to respond with. And so the Prophet ﷺ said, take Abu Bakr as your assistant, because Abu Bakr is the one of us who knows the most in terms of lineage and tribes and history of the Arabs. He'll be able to give you the content and you make the poetry. He said that when you speak, the angel Jibreel alayhi salam will be behind you, will be supporting you. Hassan ibn Thabit had Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu assisting him. And he had the angel Jibreel alayhi salam assisting him. Why? Because he had a skill. And he used that skill for the sake of the deen. Now the rest of his life wasn't always as perfect as it was in this instance. When it came to battle, and we know how important the battles were at the time of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And when it came to the battles, all of the men would go out and fight. And they would leave behind, especially in the Battle of Khandaq, the Battle of the Trench, where they deployed every single able man on the borders of the trenches to defend the city of Medina. They left in the castles, the women, the children, the elderly and the sick, and Hassan ibn Thabit. Not to belittle him, not to put him down. That's not the reason that we mentioned this story, but to show that he had a weakness. He wasn't able to fight. He wasn't that type of person, right? He didn't let his weakness get to him and prevent him from working for the deen. He didn't say, you know what, I'm not a warrior, I can't fight in the wars. All of the other men are out there, I'm just going to seclude myself and put myself down. He said, I have a strength, let me use it for the sake of the deen. But when it comes to war, we had the likes of Khalid ibn Walid, radiallahu anhu, who was the one who led the armies of the Muslims. He's the one who conquered Persia and Rome. But it was said that he only knew the shortest of the surah. The shortest surahs of the Quran is what he had memorized. When we know Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu narrated the most ahadith, thousands. Without him, this deen wouldn't have been preserved the way that it was. But it was said that at night he would pray his Isha, he would pray his Witr, and he'd go to sleep. He wasn't of the type who would stay up at night praying Tahajjud all night. Again, these Sahaba were not entire, walking Quran as the Prophet ﷺ was. They weren't perfect human beings. They weren't the cream of the crop like Abu Bakr and Umar. But they did their part, and without them this deen would not have been honored, would not have been preserved, would not have spread the way that it did. Because they understood their part and the role that they had to play. Similarly, every single one of us has a role to play. When we always think of, And subhanAllah, it's one of the biggest things that I think holds us back as an ummah and as a community, is we've taken on, like I said, this very secular or very Christian even definition of what it means to be a Muslim, what it means to be religious, and so on, right? In Islam, we don't have such thing as a clergy like the Christians do. They have their priests and their pope who are chosen by God, right? And they have the role of representing their religion, and everybody else is seen as a born sinner. We don't have that in this deen. The responsibilities of every single one of us to this deen are the same, and that is essentially to do the best that we can. Ittaqullah mastata'tum, fear Allah as much as you can. And that means in our, not just in our beliefs and in our personal iman and taqwa, but also in our actions. Every single one of us has this expectation and responsibility. We are judged, of course, each one according to our own capabilities. The one who has money is not judged the same as the poor person. The one who has knowledge is not judged the same as the one with no knowledge. But at the same time, every single one of us has that responsibility to seek whatever we can within our means and to do what we can for this deen. Christians don't have that mentality, they have their clergy. And like I said earlier, this sort of secular mindset of religious versus non-religious, we don't have this in the deen. SubhanAllah, I think back to so many people that I know that I grew up with in school and university and so on, that have so much that they could have given to this deen. So much knowledge, so much fluency in the way that they speak, in the way that they interact with people, so much potential to have done so much for this deen. And again, not to sort of belittle anyone, obviously not mentioning any names, but you see that you finish uni, you get into a job, and you're 9 to 5 and you go home and that's it. And there's no more sort of involvement with this deen in terms of activism, in terms of seeking ilm, in terms of teaching, anything like that. And reflecting on that, I think a big part of that is because majority of our community almost just has this mentality that I'm just an average Muslim. There's the mashayikh, there's the people that do the da'wah, there's all of these people are community leaders. My role is an average Muslim. So what do? Is if I'm religious, so what do? Obviously I pray my 5 times, I go to the Jum'ah, I fast in Ramadan, I pay my zakat, and if I'm religious, I'll pray some sunnah, I'll go to the mosque every now and then to pray jama'ah. If I'm religious, I might attend a class or two, and I might recite the Quran every now and then. And that's it. But again, it's a very individualistic mindset. This is what I do if I'm going way above and beyond. But there's so much more. There's not a responsibility that's upon the mashayikh that they need to do the da'wah and carry this deen to everybody, and we as average people just need to sit behind. No. These opportunities should be open for us. And again, there's a bigger discussion here about like the community and how much opportunities are given for youth especially, and for sisters as well, and how much opportunity is given for the rest of us to give our services. But that's a separate discussion. How much are we actually putting in the effort to offer our services? How much are we putting in the effort to go above and beyond in serving our community, in serving our deen? Rather than just saying, that's not my responsibility, I go to the masjid and I pray. Every single one of us has that responsibility. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose us for this deen. He chose us to be Muslims, as I said. Allah guides and He misguides. He guided us, whether it's by giving us the blessing at birth to be born into Muslim families, or whether it's by giving us the opportunity to be around the right people who have guided us back to Islam, to practicing Islam, or if we were born as non-Muslims and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us the guidance to be guided to Islam. Allah chose us. And not just the guidance to Islam, but He gave us the greatest of blessings to be part of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, which is the greatest nation, better than any nation of the previous prophets. He gave us the blessing of being part of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Hajj, in the final ayah of Surah Al-Hajj, He says, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ. Strive in the path of Allah as Allah deserves for us to strive in His path. Now this isn't even the point that I want to take out of this ayah, but that line alone, like how much does Allah deserve for us to carry this deen? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the greatest, the one who gave us all of the blessings, that if we were to count all of our blessings, subhanAllah, we know the story in the hadith where the Prophet ﷺ mentioned the person who worshipped for 500 years. And he goes to stand before Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on the day of judgment. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells him, I will admit you into my Jannah out of my mercy. And so the man is feeling like a little bit like, Ya Allah, like, of course I want to enter Jannah, but I've worshipped for 500 years. Can you judge me according to my actions rather than just saying out of your mercy? And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, okay. He tells the angel, put his 500 years worth of worship on one side of the scale. And put his ability to see with his eyes on the other side of the scale. The blessing of sight outweighed 500 years of worship. How much does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala deserve our sacrifice? How much does He deserve our energy? How much does he deserve our time? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, وَجَاهِدُوا فِي اللَّهِ حَقَّ جِهَادِهِ. Strive, sacrifice for Allah the amount that He deserves. Can any of us do that? We can't, right? It's not humanly possible. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows this. But when He's telling us this, it's to give us a sense of the importance of carrying this deen. To give us some perspective on what's expected of us. Then He says, هُوَ اجْتَبَاكُمْ. He is the one who selected you. Now Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the scholars of tafsir, part of their work is that they look at the words that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses, and they look at synonyms that He could have chosen and say, why did He choose this specific word, not the other? And part of the richness of the Arabic language is that you can have various synonyms for one word, which mean the same thing, but there's slight differences, right? What's the background? He is the one who selected you. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that He selected us to be Muslims, to be part of those who yujahidu fillah. They sacrifice and they strive for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? He says He selected you. The word that He uses is ijtaba, huwa ijtabakum, right? Now it's interesting when you contrast it to other words Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses in the Quran for selection. When He talks about the prophets, when He selected the prophets, He uses the word in most cases istafa. Again, He selected. Ijtaba, istafa. He selected, right? When He talks about the selecting the prophets, the word that's used is istafa. Does anybody know the difference, by the way? But any chance about between ijtaba and istafa? Very minute difference. Istafa means to select something without any logical reason that you can give. For example, my favorite flavor of ice cream is mint chocolate. Okay? And every time I grab it, my wife looks at me as if I'm like some despicable version of a human being, like I don't deserve to live or something. Like mint chocolate, right? I can't describe it, I can't explain it. I can't tell you why it's my favorite, but I can't do anything to change it. I love it. Is anybody else with me? Do you guys like mint chocolate? Yeah?
Big fan.
I'm not alone. Okay?
That's my biggest enemy over there.
But can anybody justify why you like mint chocolate? Is there a reason that you can give? Can somebody logically like disprove it against you and then convince you that another flavor is better or that it's disgusting? You can't, right?
It's just amazing.
That's istafa. That you choose something just because. And that's what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says when He chose the prophets. Why did He choose Musa alayhi salam to be a prophet? Why did He choose Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam to be a messenger? He just did. There's nothing that you can say that will prove that or disprove that. There's nothing that you can say to argue for that or against that. These are the people that He chose. When He says that He chose us to strive in His path, what's tabakum? Ijtaba means that He chose us for a reason. That there's a logical reason that you can give. You know, you own a company, you own a business, and or you work as a recruiter for a business, and you interview someone, and then you go back to the directors or the owners of the business and you tell them, I interviewed this person and they're a great fit for the job. They ask you why. You say, just because, you know, they should get the job. That's not going to fly, right? The owner of the company will be like, why do they deserve the job? What's the reason? Is it their experience? Is it the way they interviewed, the way that they spoke, their values? What is it? You have to have a reason, right? When you give that reason, you go from ijtaba to istafa. Sorry, from istafa to ijtaba. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is telling us that when He selected us, He chose us for a reason. What's the point I'm trying to get at? Every single one of us has value that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has recognized. He chose us to be Muslims. He chose us to be part of the Ummah of Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. What's the defining characteristic of the Ummah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? يأمرون بالمعروف وينهون عن المنكر ويؤمنون بالله. They believe in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and they enjoin the good, they forbid the evil, meaning they carry this deen to other people. That's a defining characteristic of our ummah. And He's saying, I chose these people for this job and there's a reason for it. You and me. He chose us. There's something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala saw in us that says this person is capable of carrying this deen, of enjoining the good, of forbidding the evil. So when we get those moments we're reflecting on ourselves and we're feeling down, and we all know our own sins, we know our own weaknesses and shortcomings, and sometimes they get to us. In that moment it's important for us to remember that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose us for this ummah, for this job of enjoining the good and forbidding the evil, for the job of jahidu fillahi haqqa jihadi, striving for Allah, the amount that He deserves. He chose you. And He didn't just do it randomly, He chose you because you deserve to be chosen. These are the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So don't belittle what you can offer to this thing. Every single one of us is important. Every single one of us can play a crucial role. Every single one of us has the ability to transform. SubhanAllah, look at the Sahaba. and who so many of them were before Islam and who they became after Islam. Like, think of our own weaknesses and shortcomings. Has any one of us tried to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Right? The greatest calamity you can imagine, trying to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That's what Umar was doing on his way before he converted to Islam and did a complete 180. Became Amir al-Mu'mineen, the leader of the Muslims. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said if there were to be a prophet after me, it would be Umar. The same man who just years before was on his way to kill the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Again, when we feel down about ourselves, or when we feel limited in what we can offer, what we can do, don't belittle your ability to transform. So many examples in the Sahaba, so many examples in the scholars, even in years that afterwards, the stories of the scholars who were highway robbers and thieves before they transformed and became, scholars of this deen. Modern examples, people like, I think of like Malcolm X, whose autobiography is one of the most amazing books that I've read. And his story of being in prison, and his nickname in prison was Satan, because of how much he hated religion, how disgusting his character was. It was in religion that he converted, not to Islam, to the nation of Islam, which is obviously a deviant sect and complete kufr. But then to go from that and then to be able to criticize the beliefs that he had and to become able to enter into the fold of Islam, the transformation that you see there is amazing. And he was someone who was in prison, drug dealer, pimp, the worst of the worst, and then passes away maybe 15, 20 years later as one of the most influential people till today. When we look at ourselves and think like, who am I and what can I achieve? None of us are as bad as he was. But every single one of us has the ability to do more. Set your sights high, set your goals high, especially reflecting on what we can do in our circles. It becomes hard sometimes because we put in effort, we strive and we strive and we strive and we don't see results. In whatever area it might be, whether it's our own personal, we're trying to implement a habit, we're trying to memorize the Quran and we're struggling. Whether it's in terms of MSA dawah, you're putting in effort, you're organizing an event and then nobody rocks up. Okay? You set up a dawah stall and 2 hours later nobody has walked past, or you're standing there and there's nobody that even speaks to you, that even, has a meaningful conversation. Whether it's dawah outside, whether you're trying to give some good words of advice to a friend and they're not listening, they're not, listening to your words. And it becomes deflating and then we feel like the shortcoming is in ourselves. That's not always the case. And most of the time that's not the case. When we look at the example, of course, of Sayyidina Nuh alayhi salam, preached for 950 years, how many followers did he have? 13. 13 followers in 950 years. Like, if you were to just look at numbers, what do you even say about that? SubhanAllah, mashallah, like the brother was telling me that there's people who converted at the dawah stall at Macquarie this year. That's amazing. Right? And that in 1 year, 950 years, 13 people. Not to belittle the efforts of the Prophet. My point is that the results are not in your hands. You can do everything in your abilities. If Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decides that you're not going to get the results that you're after, you won't get them. It's not because He's punishing you, it's not because you don't deserve the results. It's just in His wisdom, He's decided this is not what's going to happen on you. That you're trying and speaking to a friend and giving them advice and whatever it might be, and they're just not listening. It's not because you're doing something wrong. You're organizing an event and nobody rocks up. It doesn't mean the event was a failure. Because as long as you do something for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you do it sincerely and you put in the effort, it's a success. It doesn't matter how much the numbers might be or how successful it might be from a practical, materialistic point of view. It doesn't matter. You're trying to memorize verses of the Quran and they're just not sticking. Again, we can always reflect on our styles and our methods and what we can do differently to be more successful. But it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with you trying to memorize the Quran. Keep trying. And even if it doesn't work, you get in the hasanat either way. If you're trying to learn tajweed and how to recite the Quran, but your tongue's just not twisting its way around the Arabic letters, that's not an issue on your part. The Prophet ﷺ said that the one who stutters as they recite the Quran gets double the rewards, because you're showing perseverance and steadfastness in the face of lack of results. All that matters is staying steadfast, showing your tawakkul on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Have faith. In tansurullah yansurkum. If you support Allah, and what does it mean to support Allah? It means to hold firmly the boundaries of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He's placed, to avoid the haram. It means to do the halal, to do the fard. If you do that, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will support you. And this is what's asked for us. And subhanAllah, part of as a bit of a side point as well, but part of the issues that we face is that we end up reflecting on failures too much, but then when we plan also, we over-plan sometimes, and we don't do something unless we can expect it to be perfection, alright? Why should we bother organizing this weekly event if we're not going to get 10, 15, 20, 30, 40 people? It's only going to be 2 or 3 people. That's fine, go for it. And you never know, those 2 or 3 people might become the greatest leaders of our society, Allahu A'lam. And this weekly halaqah that you organized was the stepping stone for them. You can never know the results that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has planned for you. Don't overplan. And we live in a society that loves to overplan. Our calculators, our spreadsheets, our calendars, to the minute, everything is perfectly planned. That's not what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's not the example of that our deen has passed on to us, right? When we want to attend a class, right, and there's a Quran class, and it's on Wednesday nights, but I know I've got uni and I've got my essays, I'm going to have exams and this and that, and we end up overthinking things, and so it's like, I'm just not going to do it. If something's worth doing, it's worth doing wrong. It's better for you to be in that class and to struggle and to even fail the class than it is to not do it at all. You organize the halaqah and 1 or 2 people come, and then after 2 whole semesters there's only 2 people that come and nobody else, even those 2 people have stopped coming. It's better to do that than not to do it at all. To organize an event, a debate, whatever it is, and nobody rocks up, it's better to do that than to not do it at all. Because wallahi, the rewards that you will see on the Day of Judgment, and you would have forgotten about it by then. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will bring up this event, this sacrifice that you made, that you felt like it didn't work out, but you stayed steadfast and you stuck to something even though it didn't look like the results were in your way. That's massive. So don't overplan, don't overthink, just do things. Like I said, it's beneficial, you have the right intention, go for it. Leave the results in the hands of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and when you stick to this method, the results will come. When you look at the example of Rasul, all the prophets, and without going into the details, we see this coming despite lack of results until the tide just turned and the results started coming. So numbers don't matter in that aspect, right? And I guess as a final point, that when it comes to the deen and trying to transform who we are in terms of how we carry the deen, or trying to transform who we are as individuals, we often overemphasize the massive things, right? Like, I need this massive spark before I'm able to claim to be a good Muslim. I need to be able to pray all 5 prayers in them, whatever it is, right? Like, we set these massive expectations of ourselves. The Prophet ﷺ said, "Iklifu min al-amal ma tutiqun." Do from good actions whatever you're able to. So he's already setting the expectation, like, whatever you can do, just do it. فَإِنَّ خَيْرَ الْعَمَلِ أَدْوَمُهُ وَإِنْ قَلَّ. The most beloved of actions, the greatest of actions, are the ones that are consistent even if they're little. Whatever you can do and you can do consistently, do it. Don't think twice. If it's the smallest of actions, every single time I finish praying, I'm just going to add an extra subhanallah. After I finish my salam, I'm going to say subhanallah 1 extra time. Whatever it is, right? I'm just trying to think of whatever example. Small action. But if you do that consistently, you're adding 5 subhanallahs in your day, 35 in your week, and that's however many thousand for the rest of your life. That's a lot of rewards, right? Whatever small action that you can do, do it. If it's in your sujood, instead of saying subhana rabbil a'la 3 times, say it 5 times. Say it 7 times. It's such a small change, you're adding like 5 seconds to your salah. Right? And that's, again, an example that we can maybe try to implement. But again, bigger than that, not just in terms of personal ibadah. When we think of what can I contribute to this ummah, or what can I contribute to the MSA, or what can I contribute to da'wah, whatever small task you're able to take on, take it on. Prophet ﷺ said, whatever you're able to do, then do it. And try to stay consistent. These are the small habits that we build up. And subhanAllah, being part of something organized, like an MSA, like any organization, any of the messages out there, any of the organizations, whatever it is, get yourself attached to something, because doing things on our own is very difficult. It's very easy to become demotivated. It's very easy to lose consistency. And then we just drop off, and then 2 years later we're like, man, if I had just stuck with my reciting 1 ayah of Quran a day, I would have recited the entire Quran by now. Right? Like, something hit me the other day. If you memorize 1 page of Quran a week, you memorize the entire Quran in 12 years. It's not a lot of time. 1 page, it's not easy, but it's about, 20-30 minutes a day maybe? 1 page a week. You'll memorize the whole Quran in 12 years. And yes, you'll have gaps, and there will be things that you forget, and there will be things that you have to revise and whatever, but you'd rather do that and then start again and start revising than to just have never started at all, right? So set your sights, set your vision, identify what can I do for this ummah. And sorry, as a final point as well, don't belittle the deen, as I said, to individual acts of worship, and don't also make it just the khatib and the person, the sheikh, and whoever's giving the khutbah, who's around the Quran, that's what religious actions are. It's not. Our ummah and our da'wah and MSA and every single organization out there, go speak to anybody, ask them, what do you need in your organization? They will barely ever tell you, I need more khatibs. They'll barely ever tell you, I need somebody to lead the salah. They'll tell you, I need somebody to help us with the accounting and the finances of our masjid. I need somebody to help us design flyers. Somebody to make little videos for us. They're not religious skills that we think of. But those are the things that are needed in our community. Those are the things that can cause massive change. If you're able to write, then write blogs, write articles, write Facebook statuses and posts for organizations and mosques. If you're able to edit photos or videos, make your own YouTube video and just edit random clips of different speakers, or edit clips of Quran and just make it flood people's timelines, whatever it is, right? There's little things like find your skills. What can I do? Hassan ibn Thabit had poetry. What can I do? Khalid ibn Walid had military skills. What can I offer to this deen? And what am I going to do, small and consistent, to dedicate that? And what are the avenues that I can find where I can dedicate that time? Because as I said, collective efforts are always easier to stick to than individual efforts. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make us all among those who can sacrifice our efforts for this deen. May He make us of those who are deserving of being part of Ummah Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and may He make us of those who strive for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala the amount that He deserves. Jazakumullah khairan. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. If anyone has any questions or any points that you want to add, please feel free.